Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. Today is another live stream with Q&A focusing on dough strength. So dough strength is important because dough strength makes sure that your dough holds its shape, and that way you get more oven spring in the end. And I feel that many people don't do so well on dough strength, so I figured I'd just show you step by step how I create strength for my dough. So I already prepared a small dough, and I'll just show you how that's going to come together. For this, I just mixed flour and water for around 30 minutes. So I did that 30 minutes ago. Yeah, I'll show you the process. And please, if you have questions, send over some questions. I'm happy to answer them while I'm working on the dough. And yeah, I hope we're going to have a lot of fun. Who doesn't know me? I'm the bread coat. I'm from Hamburg, Germany, and it's so awesome. There's so many people from all around the world here joining this awesome hobby of sourdough baking. So let me just put the chat right here so that I can see from time to time what you all are writing. Hello. All right. Hi, everybody. All right, so Mary already asked an awesome question. What do you do when your sourdough starter is too sour? Well, what you should do is you should be reducing the feeding ratio a little bit of the sourdough starter. Try using a little bit less starter, more flour, and more water. Some people do a 1:1:1 ratio, but I always like to do a 1:5:5 ratio because that way your sourdough starter is not as acidic. Now, if it's too acidic, that means that at some point your gluten structure is damaged, but also a too sour environment is going to inhibit the yeast activity. So you always have to hit that sweet balance. And that's actually a very, very good point. You want to make sure that when you build a lot of strength, that your sourdough starter is also nice and healthy. Okay, Ed Bass, how do you know it's too acidic? You typically, well, you can taste it. I always recommend to just taste your sourdough starter. That's a great way. But also down the line, you will notice it when you just start working your dough and just start sticking to your hand. And that's a sign that it's too acidic. You can also use a pH measuring device, of course. I don't like it too much because you have to recalibrate it all the time. Okay, I'm now going to take this webcam here and let me just quickly turn this down so that you can see me working the dough. Hey, Harley, nice that you're back. All right, at Bass, cool. Northern Mantis, how are you? How's it going? And all right, don't want to make waffles. Yeah. Eric Mills Gebhardt, hi there from the top of Norway. Where are you exactly in Norway? Little Row, your dough seems always so sticky and hard to work with. Harley Baldwin, Guten Sonntag. Aviatrix, yes, I have you in the cabinet again. Let me just remove my watch. All right, so 2 doughs. Dough number 1 and dough number 2. I feel what many people do wrong already. Let me just quickly move this a little more to the side and this a little more here. Hope that's okay. Oh, yes, camera should be good. So dough number 1, which has a high protein flour, and this one has around 85% hydration, and this one has even more hydration. Now, my flour has more protein. That's why my flour is able to absorb more water. If your flour has less protein, then it isn't able to absorb so much water. And how much water you should use really depends on the flour that you are using. So when you see an awesome recipe on the interwebs, and there are so many awesome recipes, make sure that when it comes to the water amount, don't just follow the recipe. This is something that you have to figure out for your flour. And this is something that I wanted to show you right here. Hey, Anna. Hi to Scottsdale, Arizona. Ludovico Moreal, you started your oddlies 30 minutes ago. 2 loaves with 60% wheat, 20% spelt, 20% rye, 70% hydration. Sounds good. So this dough is actually 100% hydration, and this one is 85% hydration. I figured this one is already relatively sticky, but I figured I'd just show you adding dough strength on a very sticky one, so that this is definitely going to work for your dough as well. Now, first of all, this very high hydration dough, and you could do the same thing with 80% hydration, but just less protein amount. This flour has, let me check. This flour here has around 15% protein. So this one is really containing a lot of protein, but probably this is close to 80% on a 10% protein flour. And just have a look, you see how this tears. And now if your flour is like this after around half an hour of autolyse, then this is definitely too much water for your flour. And I see many people doing this wrong, using the wrong value of water for the flour. I mean, it's coming together a little bit, but still this dough is so incredibly sticky, and you see it just tears apart on my hand. So this is not a good level of water for this flour. And this is something that you really have to figure out for your flour combination. This is around 20% whole wheat flour. And of course, if you adjust the ratio, then this value is also going to change. So lesson number one, make sure that you use the corresponding amount of water for your flour. Boya Mi Silly by Zonali. How's it going? Hi to Mumbai. Thanks. And by the way, just one more lesson. The moment you have a sticky situation on your hand, clean your hands, because it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. Anna Isna, Raina, Stephanie first. Hey to Indonesia, how's it going? Hope all is good in Indonesia. Where are you in Indonesia? Anna Isnard, yes, table.thebread-code.io. It should be public for everybody to view. If not, I'll just check my emails a little bit later again. Now the other dough, less water, around 85% hydration, but please, this flour supports it. So this is probably the max value for this flour, and it's okay. But if your flour has less protein, then you shouldn't be doing this. Let's have a look. With wetted hands, again, I go inside, and you can see this nice window pane effect here on this flour. So this is a good value. I mean, it's still very sticky. You can see how it starts to stick in my hand and also tears a little bit, but this is definitely something that works. Okay? So this is a good dough. This is gonna work. And next up, what I have to do is I have to add my sourdough starter. This was just mixing flour and water, and then I let that sit for at least 30 minutes. That's called the autolyse, and that's always part one of building dough strength. So you learned, make sure that you use the correct amount of water for your flour, and then you do a little bit of autolyse, 30 minutes. You can even do longer. You can up to overnight, actually. That's sometimes what I do if I want to bake early in the morning. That's going to help adding a lot of strength. And furthermore, what happens is the moment you mix flour and water, the starch is broken down in your flour, and this makes it easier for the sourdough to ferment your mixture. So a longer autolyse makes it easier to ferment from your sourdough. It also makes the flour a little more extensible, so you can get an more open crumb. I always autolyse for at least 30 minutes, typically around an hour or 2 hours. And sometimes if I want to bake early in the morning, I'll do that overnight. Just mix flour and water, let that sit at room temperature, and start adding my sourdough in the morning. Aviatrix, oh, sorry. I'm just gonna check real quick through the questions. Aviatrix, high protein. High protein, I would say the average flour in Germany is around 10 to 11% protein, and this one is around 15% protein. Yes, Ebba. So high protein, I would say everything over 12%. Yep. So Harley, yes, exactly like Harley said. Sebastian, hi to Chile. Hi to Chile as well. Mary, hi to Toronto, Canada. Oh, Grant McPhee. I just finished shaping my dough. Now I'll find out what I might have done wrong. Let's have a look. Ludovico, high protein is 14%, and more, my normal wheat flour is 12%. Yes, that makes sense. At Boss, yes, this is what you call bread flour. Typically, what they do is they take regular flour and they just mix in a little bit of additional gluten. All right, time to add the salt. Now, there's two kinds of people. Some add salt already right away, and some add it a little bit later. There's also another great YouTuber, Food Geek. He has done extensive experiments on this. There's one thing, and that's for sure. Salt is going to slow down the growth of the yeast. I actually read a book on this. It's around 4% slower. And also, of course, it has an impact on the reactions that are already happening inside of our dough. So I just like it to add it together with the sourdough starter, but some add it right away. I guess you have to figure this out on your own. Probably it's just a marginal difference, I guess. So I'm going to be adding the salt now. And for this, there has been a European Union regulation. So I'm from Germany. We are part of the European Union, and they regulate a lot. And one regulation is how much salt ideally should be put into a bread. And that's around 2% based on the flour mass. There's also regulations on the size of bananas, for instance. How should a banana look like? And all sorts of other funny stuff. But yes, this is regulated. It should be around 2% salt. The bakers call this baker's math because that way they can scale up the recipe. I'm now just baking one bread, but if I wanted to bake 10, 20, 50 breads, then I could just increase the flour amount and I would know exactly what to do. So salt added, and now comes the starter. Now, for your sourdough starter, it should be, you should mark your jar and make sure that your sourdough starter is not too acidic. I can't show it so well because I have to rotate the jar, but I fed this earlier this morning and it roughly doubled in size. This is good. It's not too acidic. I fed this a 1:5 ratio earlier this morning, around 8 hours ago. So that's 1 part of old starter, 5 parts of flour, and 5 parts of water. In this case, rye flour. To everybody who saw my last video, I just love rye flour. It gives such an incredible additional taste. But you can use whatever flour you have available to feed your starter. I would always recommend a whole flour. So not bread flour, use whole wheat, whole rye, whole spelt, whatever you have available. Rye, I feel, just adds this amazing, sehr amazing taste. From this, I'm going to be adding 20%. Now, the value that I'm using here, the 20%, also depends on how much time you have available. If I were to make an overnight sourdough starter, I would probably be using around 10% because the fermentation process will be a little bit slower. So based on the starter, you can influence how long the fermentation process should take. I made this table, which I showed in the last video, where it shows roughly based on the temperature for how long you should ferment. And just to show you the temperature, I got this awesome geek tool here. Look at this, 26 degrees Celsius. Now I have no idea how much that is in Fahrenheit, but it's pretty warm today. And based on this, I'm sure my dough is just going to require around 5 hours in total to ferment. So it's going to be quick. So starter has been added, salt has been added. This is all the ingredients that go into this sourdough. And I'm just going to be opening up a nice beer. Very good beer from Germany. Flensburger from the north, that's where I'm from. And Edles Helles, a little bit of Bavarian brew style. I just love this beer. And when you open up the bottle, it should always make this sound. Very important. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. Very satisfying. I'm so behind the chat. I'm so sorry. Hello from Armenia, Gohar. How's it going? Mary Beth. Mary Beth asked whether to that too wet dough I can add additional flour. Yes, that's something I could do. Although then in the end it becomes a little bit hard with also measuring the salt and everything. So what I would do is with that flour, I would probably be using it to feed my sourdough starter one more time or so, or place that in my discard starter jar, so just that I have a clean slate. But yes, you could definitely do that. Eric Milch Gebhardt. Sounds like a German name. My dough always feels so soft when taking it out of the fridge. It must be too much water, low dough strength, or over fermentation, but how to figure out what? I would first try to reduce the water amount and then just try changing one variable at a time. All right, so I'm now just going to use my hands and I will just flatten out here the starter. Just note the dark color, that's my rice starter. Flatten it out here everywhere on the dough. And now the kneading starts. And for the kneading, there's not really a technique. What I like to do is I just like to go inside, take this dough, pull it upwards, rotate, and repeat. It's mostly just about homogenizing and making sure that, for instance, here you can see the sourdough starter still in this one place here. Better light, I guess. And you just want to make sure that this is evenly incorporated everywhere. So this is what I do. I'm not really doing this to add a lot of strength. That will be done a little bit later. I'm just making sure that everything here is nicely incorporated. I love to use a pot because with a pot, in the end, I can just close the lid. Makes it very easy. So just go in here, pull upwards, and you can just do some tests from time to time. You can see this dough already roughly stays in my hand. So this is a good sign for dough strength, that you used a ratio of flour and water that works. But we still have to develop this dough a little bit. We have to knead this a little bit to just get that gluten structure. And the gluten structure, imagine just a balloon, and the balloon is going to be inflated in the end by the sourdough. Already looking a little bit better, but yeah, just doing this a little more for a few more minutes. I like to do probably 2 or 3 minutes or so of just some kneading, incorporating everything together. Baking is just so much fun. I love baking. Such a great hobby, and there's nothing more satisfying than when you remove your bread from the oven and it has beautiful oven spring and nice looking ear, and then you have some guests over and you give them a slice of your bread and they are just stunned and amazed. They don't know what to say because the bread just tastes so good. I love the fact that it's just 3 ingredients: flour, water, and salt. So this, you can see now, it already looks quite incorporated. Incorporated. All right, at the same time, Aviatrix and Vital Wheat Gluten is available to increase the protein. And yes, Aviatrix, valid point. If you only get a flour which has low gluten content, you can always buy a Vital Wheat Gluten to add it to your flour. This, in fact, what also many mills do. It's just another extract from the flour. That's why they don't even have to list this on the packaging. But yes, that's what's done many times. Nazlin Vaz, how are you? How's it going? Nazlin asks, when you first start a new starter, what flour should you use? And how long does it take to mature into something that can be used or stored? When your starter doubles in size within, let's say, 5 hours at room temperature, 24 or 25 degrees Celsius, after feeding, that's when your starter is ready to be used for bread baking. How long can you store it in the fridge? Probably 2 months without doing anything with it. You can always revive it. To revive your starter, it's probably enough to just take a finger tip like this, feed it over a few more days, and your sourdough starter is likely going to be back alive. Nathalie also asked another question at the beginning. What ratio should you use? 1 to 1 to 1. Is that okay? Yes. I do that sometimes when I know that my feeding has just been a few hours ago, but typically to avoid a too acidic starter, which I feel many people do and which causes them some issues, I like to just feed 1 to 5 to 5. That way I have less lactic and acidic. Oh, acidic, my German English. I'm so sorry. Is it acidic? Acidic? Don't know. So there's 2 kinds of acid, and then you have less acid to start with. The less acid, the more you can develop your gluten structure, which is essential for this kind of bread. And furthermore, the more active your yeast is. So the acid, when you want to build an open crumb bread, then the acid is a little bit of a bummer. And so you see here from kneading, what I like to do is I take the dough out, lift it, and fold it over. But this is such a sticky dough. Let's see if we can succeed in building the dough strengths here. Jawohl, Herr Dough, Mr. Dough. Good boy. This dough is coming together. You see how it sticks to the bottom? Ausgezeichnet. All right, so I'm just gonna leave this now for around 15, not 50. On all my videos, people always comment, is he saying 15 or 50? I don't get it. And so now I since I have an issue with saying 15. It's 15, 15, not 50, sorry. So yeah, 15 minutes. I will just let that wait. And now the fermentation process already started. You don't want to wait for too long. Just give it a little bit of time to soak up that starter, to soak up that additional water. It shouldn't be more than 15 to 30 minutes, I guess. Because, yeah, well, your dough ferments. Your dough increases in size already. So you want to touch it as little as possible. But 15 minutes is a good time. I'm just going to clean my hands. And you can see how messy my hands are right now. And you will see in just a little bit when we do the bench kneading, your hands will be less and less messy every time. So just give me 30 seconds. I will clean my hands and be right back. And until that, you can just watch this beautiful dough. And hello. Be right back. And I'm back! I'm not gone, I'm still here and my hands are cleaned. I'm gonna be rotating the camera again because while we wait, we can have a look at some of the amazing questions that all of you asked. So I love it also on the videos. You always ask so many challenging questions where I also have to think and double check. Sometimes have to research a little bit on some of the questions. But it's just so good. By teaching others, I learn a lot myself all the time. So I really love your questions. All right, so my laptop, I have it here on the side. Let me check. Oh, I'm so far behind. I'm so sorry. Sean Gray asks, why can I never shape the dough right? It never develops tightness, just gets sticky again. Sean, I've been there and I know that's super frustrating. I have a theory. We are building dough strength now, and this is something you can do. And if you get to the same level of dough strength as we do in the stream, then your dough shouldn't do this. Your dough should not become sticky when you shape it. Now, if it does, then very, very likely you over-fermented your dough. So have a look in the stream how we are building that dough strength. If you can do the same thing, then you did everything right. Then you just have to, in the next iteration, ferment until that perfect sweet spot. And yeah, a mistake many people do is their starter is too acidic, and that way they cannot develop this dough strength. And furthermore, the dough just becomes very, very sticky in the end. So hope this answered your question. Vasiliki, you always forget to. Vasiliki says, first of all, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. You always forget to add the salt. Yeah, me too, sometimes. And sometimes I also, when I bake, this has happened much more recently, I want to reduce the temperature after I place my dough to bake. Well, and instead of just reducing the temperature, I turn off the oven. Then I go back, I come back in 25 minutes, and the dough is just didn't do anything. Pretty much it rose a little bit, but yeah, then also starts to stick to the container because it didn't form that crust so fast. So yeah, that's the honest kitchen. Happens to everybody. So, Osnat, doesn't overnight oddlies mean the gluten may be broken up by enzyme activity by the time you mix in the starter in? That's actually an excellent question. In my case, the flour starts to break down typically after around 24 hours at room temperature. So an extended oddlies overnight has not caused me any issues so far. Definitely try this. This also, of course, depends on your flour because every flour is unique. But if you just want to feel safe, you can also just take your pot, your mixture of flour and water and place it in the fridge, because in the fridge, the whole reactions are also slowed down. Hope this answered your question. Excellent question, by the way. Sebastian Huing, what is an ideal temperature for making the starter dough? There is no ideal temperature. Every temperature works. In general, the warmer it is, the more the bacterial component of your starter is active. The colder it is, the more the yeast component of your sourdough starter is active. So in winter, things will take longer because the activity is not as fast, but at the same time, you also don't over-ferment that much because you produce more gas rather than acid inside of your starter. So I guess when it's around 30 degrees Celsius, so when it's very, very hot, then everything is much faster. Just a difference of 2 degrees Celsius can be a major difference. And you run into the issue of over-fermentation much faster because the time window where you hit that sweet spot reduces from 30 minutes to maybe 10 minutes or so. So the warmer it is, the more you really have to read the science of your dough. But it works at different temperatures. Hope that answered the question. So, Raina Stephanie, I usually do my levain at a 1-to-1 ratio, and I usually triple in size. Is it going to be too acidic if the starter tripled? No, not necessarily. So the size doesn't really correlate to the acidity. Try tasting your sourdough starter just to get a feeling for how sour it is. And maybe try doing a 1-to-5 feeding ratio just to see if you have less issues of sticky dough towards the end of the bulk fermentation stage. If your doughs tend to flatten out a lot in the oven, you don't get that much oven spring, I feel you should be changing the feeding schedule of your sourdough starter a little bit. Hope that answered your question. Roseanne Lowy, recently read that the UK is recommending 1.5 salt in bread products. Recommending might not mean mandatory. Yes. I also don't think it's fully mandatory, although, yeah, that's what I read on a couple of websites. And this 2% salt value, I use it for so many different things. So actually, in fact, tomorrow I'm going to make some German bratwurst at home, and I found a recipe which also uses a little bit of baker's math. Even there, they use 2% based on the amount of meat that you're using. So yeah, we Germans really love our sausages. There's also a German saying, "Jetzt geht es die Wurst." Now it goes around the sausage, if you translate it directly, because sausage is really something so important for us. And if you start talking about the sausage, it really gets very, very critical. So yeah, you also like to use it for tomato sauces. 2% salt, I feel, is a great recommendation. But also, of course, this is a personal preference. This depends on how you like your bread. Eric Milch, Gebhardt, link to the fermentation table. Yes, so the fermentation table is table.the-bread-code.io. But please take it with a grain of salt. I didn't develop the table originally. It was another person. I linked him also there in the table at the top. I just took it and simplified the table a little bit. And on the source table, you can also see all the formulas that are used to calculate the values. But still, this depends a lot on your setup, on your sourdough. I would much rather recommend just use that as a rough ballpark figure so that you know, okay, within this hour, it should roughly double in size, or within those 2 hours. But you read the signs of your dough. That's much more important than just following the table. Hope that answered your question. My thermometer, Vasiliki asks, what is my thermometer called? I have no idea what this, it's called Mestec. I got it on, I got it from Amazon. And it's pretty cool. I just love measuring temperature. We can measure my own temperature. What does it say? Oh, 34. Shoot. Yeah, it's very warm. Now you know that I'm 34 degrees. Emilio Bascari, I have a strong starter. It can increase 3 times in size, but I have a problem with the final shape. It's so flat. Is the shaping the problem of the bowl I used to leave the resting at the fridge? Okay. Emilio, excellent question. So basically, just to sum it up, you are shaping your bread, but in the end, the bread just turns out very flat in the oven. 2 things. Well, 3 things. As you said, the shaping might be a reason, but I feel the issue is probably even a little bit earlier. The issue is with the strength, the dough strength that you're building, which we're doing inside of this video. And it might be that your starter is also too acidic. You have too much acid, which damages a little bit of your structure. So I would probably look at that. But of course, shaping is also really essential. A tight shaping will give you nice oven spring, but at the same time, it's also about finding that sweet spot. A too loose shaping, no oven spring. A too tight shaping, more oven spring. But a more tight shaping also means less of an open crop. So yes, not too tight, but also a little bit tight. So it depends. That's what makes it so hard. You always have to find the sweet spot in every situation when you're doing sourdough baking. And also, I hope that answered your question. Excellent question. Galabu Cooks, hi from Hong Kong. I love the sour taste, so I'm using 120 grams of starter and 60 grams of bread flour. You love the sour taste. So, okay. Excellent question. I love the sour taste too of bread. So I really enjoy that. There's some people who hate it and some who love it. If you really want to get a very, very sour taste, then don't build any strength. Just mix everything together. Try to go for a 1-to-1 flour-water ratio. So 100 grams of your final dough, that could be 500 grams of flour, 500 grams of water. So it's very wet dough. Don't develop any dough strength. Put in your starter, just stir it a little bit. Wait until that also increased a little bit in size, roughly 5 hours or so, depending on your room temperature, of course. And take that and toss that into a loaf pan. And you can ferment it for a longer period of time, a day or so, then in the fridge, and then just bake it in a loaf pan. You will have a really sour bread, a decent amount of oven spring, and it's hassle-free. So sour bread does not work with that much oven spring. There's a limit to it. The higher your gluten amount inside of your flour, the more acidic you can get your sourdough, because there's more gluten that takes more time to break down by the acid inside of your dough. So to get a more acidy product in the end, try using a stronger flour, or try going for the loaf pan option. I actually really like the loaf pan option because it's just so easy. Hope that answered your question, and hi to Hong Kong. Isn't there this one Michelin star restaurant where you can eat dim sum? I heard about it. I know that some people I know have also been there and said it's really amazing. Vinicus Franco, moin. Wow, nice. Moin. So there's a saying, What does a Hamburgian say to another person when you're greeted moin moin? So to everybody, that's a greeting we use in Hamburg, just moin. So when somebody says moin moin in Hamburg, which is not Hamburgian, the answer to moin moin is just moin. So random fact. So we don't say moin moin, we just say moin. Wu Jiamin. I'm sorry if I did not pronounce your name correctly. Your question was, your sourdough bread never holds its shape. It always spreads out after it's taken from the pan. What should I do? Very likely, I think you are using too much water for your flour. Just try reducing the water content a little bit. The last video I added, which is a very lengthy one, I'm sorry everybody, but I feel I just had to explain everything in detail. I'm showing you how to make amazing bread, which does not have that much water. It's just roughly around 65% in hydration, but still it's going to be an amazing bread. The correct level of water paired with proper fermentation is going to get you excellent oven spring. Now, if you want to go higher in water, you really have to hit that fermentation sweet spot. I'll show you with this dough in a little bit how it's going to come together. We've been waiting for around, I guess, 10 minutes for now, just maybe another 5 minutes, and then we can build some more strength. If your dough looks the same way as mine does, then you did everything right. Then you can just try experimenting with your setup for a little bit longer. But if your dough does not look like the dough that we're putting together today, then really consider using less water for your flour. Hope that answered your question. Matthew Jenkins, you like the trick where you put a little bit of the dough into a jar to track expansion? Yes. This trick really has made me a better baker, and it is so simple. To everybody who does not know the trick, just extract a tiny piece of the dough, place the dough in another jar so that you can observe. Once that doubled in size, then you're ready to proceed with shaping. Actually, just to be safe, you can also already start when that dough is not maybe doubled in size, but shortly before. That way you don't run into that risk of over fermentation. But if you're really the crumb hunter, you want that most open crumb possible, then you really have to max the fermentation out in every different stage. Little Row, if it's too sticky, can you add a bit of flour? Yes, you can add a little bit of flour, but then you also need to recalculate your sourdough addition. You need to recalculate your salt addition. So yes, you could do that. But I would advise to just take a tiny portion of your flour, maybe 50 grams or so, and test your flour's hydration potential before. So I have a video on this as well, where I just show how I find out the max potential for my flour. And then you can always calculate the right amount. But yes, you could add more flour, but it of course makes things a little bit more complicated and not reproducible in the end. So the next time you bake, you might not know exactly what you did. But yes, you can definitely do that. Eric, have you stolen a Lufthansa trolley to have in the kitchen? Yes, I have stolen one. No. I actually obtained it. I love it. Osnard, how long should you bake the bread with the lid on? Some only bake 20 minutes and get a beautiful ear. I'm always afraid that it won't be enough and rather go for 30 minutes with lid on. Osnard, so excellent question. When you use a Dutch oven, you should be removing the lid at some point. Now, there's only, in my experience, expansion for the first 10 minutes of the bake. So you could already remove your lid after 10 minutes. 15 minutes, the latest, you could already remove it. Now, the moment you remove the lid, you will get a thicker and thicker crust. So based on when you remove the lid, you can decide of how crusty, is that even a word, crusty? Wie krustig in German. Wie krustig you want your bread to be. Now, are you the person that loves a really thick crust or a smaller crust? When you want to make a super soft bread, then just leave the lid on the whole period of time. Then you will have a very, very chewy crust, which is sometimes amazing for some soups or so, where you don't want that crispiness. So it depends on what you want, but it would be safe to remove after 10 minutes already. Hope that answered your question. Miriam Vigil. Miriam, how's it going, Miriam? I hope it's Miriam with a Y. I never saw this before. Is it still Miriam? So question was, what is the longest that you can final proof in the refrigerator before baking? At 4 degrees Celsius in your fridge, the fermentation activity comes to halt almost completely. So when it's 4 degrees Celsius in your fridge, that can be 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days. It's not going to be a problem. But if you're above that threshold just a little bit, then your dough will keep fermenting and it will become more sour and more sour. And at some point, your structure might be damaged. Now, inside of the fridge, actually, the yeast is more active than the bacteria, just as a side note. So you can ferment for a little bit longer in the fridge. I sometimes do up to 36 hours, but typically, in my case, I bake my bread before. But sometimes I'm too lazy to bake it, and that's why I love to proof in the fridge, because you can just time this for yourself. But yes, it depends on the temperature in your fridge, and have a look. The top rack is typically relatively warmer than the bottom rack. In my case, the top rack is around 6 degrees Celsius, and the bottom rack only 4 degrees Celsius. But yeah, I would say on the 4 degrees Celsius rack, I can see that the fermentation activity really already comes to a halt after 12 hours. You don't see any further increase in the Bannaton or so. So at the start, your dough is still fermenting a little bit, but then it just gets colder and colder and colder, and you don't have any additional fermentation activity. Hope that answered your question. Michelle Jamie, hi. You started to watch the channel 2 days ago. Welcome. Nice to meet you. From Australia. What do you call an alien from Austria? An Australian. Okay, I'm sorry. Michelle, so the starter is too acidic. Yes, the starter is too acidic. Your sourdough is a combination of yeast organisms and bacterial organisms. The bacterial organisms create acid. This acid is what gives the sourdough its unique taste. And it gives its awesome taste. However, when you want to bake a very soft and yummy, fluffy bread, well, then this acid is going to mitigate that crumb structure. It's destroying that crumb structure at some point. Now, if your sourdough starter is too acidic, which means that maybe when you fed it not recently, but let's say a day or so ago, then you've gathered up all that acid. And now when you mix that into your dough, at some point it's okay, but that acid production will increase and increase and increase. At some point you hit that point where your dough just becomes way too sticky. Now you want to try basically with a lower level of base acid when you start fermenting your sourdough. And that's what the feeding schedule is important for. So rather than a 1:1:1 ratio, which would be 1 part of sourdough starter, 1 part of flour, 1 part of water, you could be using a 1:5:5 ratio. That way you have less base acid the moment you start fermenting your sourdough. I hope that made sense. All right, okay, everybody. I'm just gonna stop answering the questions now. You are all amazing, awesome questions. It's been a lot of fun so far. Let's continue working on this dough. I will just take this camera one more time and move it down here. Oops. Hello, Mr. Dough. I'm putting you back to my cupboard. Okay. All right. Let's have a look now. Let's do another window pane effect just to see if this dough came together. Go in here, pull it, and yes, beautiful structure as you can see here. Test this after you added your starter 15 minutes later. Can you build that window pane effect? Yes or not? If you can, all good. If not, if this just tears apart, likely you have been using too much water for your flour. And we didn't really do that much kneading yet. So This is what your dough should look like before proceeding with the next stage. I will now take this dough, and I will take this dough out of my container and place it here on the surface to do some bench kneading. And for this, I just go in here, pull it, flap it over. Same thing until I can remove the dough from my container. You can see now with one hand, I can very easily take the dough and remove it from the container. I'll place the dough, the other container here at the bottom. And this is now our dough. And just look at how sticky this dough still is. Very sticky dough. Some people like to use a bench scraper now, but just to show you that it's even possible without a bench scraper, I'm just going to do all that strength development today without a bench scraper. Now, the moment your hands started to stick, they will stick more and more. So I like to clean my hands with just a little bit of water. And let's get started. And this purpose here for bench kneading is to use the tension of the surface. I'm not using any flour. Don't use any flour, but you can see how much the dough sticks to the surface. But this is what we are using to be able to stretch the dough very far apart. And now we have a sticky side right here, which we will be folding over. And now the sticky side, you see, the sticky sides just stick here and the dough doesn't flow out. We are pretty much gluing the dough together. And this only works because our surface is sticky. So I'm just going here and I'm folding the dough over. And you can already see how well this dough holds its shape. And this is also what your dough should do. In the end, when you bake it, it shouldn't spread out flat. If your dough is not like this, you see, I just did, I think, was it 2 or 3? I don't remember. I'm sorry. 2 or 3 folds, and my dough is already holding its shape like this. That's just the Oddly's proper amount of flour and water, and a little bit of incorporating the starter. So one more time, I'm just gonna do this and repeat, and you can just see how this dough magically holds its shape. Giving the dough a good tap is always very important. Mr. Dough, you're gonna make amazing bread. And take the dough, fold it over again, and just have a look at how beautiful this dough is already holding its shape without me pretty much doing any sorts of hardcore kneading. Impressive, right? And when you follow my recipes, this is the signs that I want you to look out for. And that's why I always recommend to not use a kitchen machine, because this is a good dough and you wouldn't necessarily notice that when using a kitchen machine. Anyways, I'm just going to repeat this now a few more times just to develop additional strength. I like to do this for around a minute all the time. And you see, with quick movements, I go in here, I try to hold the dough as short as possible, because else it starts to stick more to my hands. And I'm going in here, I'm pulling the dough out and then folding it over. So I'm just trying to touch the dough with my fingertips now. Trying to touch it as little as possible, and a quick movement here really helps. And this just creates so much incredible dough strength. And you see, I'm pulling it out, folding it over. And some people, I can show you, some people even do like something, they take the dough and just toss it on the table. Well, you could do that if you wanted to create a mess in your kitchen. Yes, sure. And now, now I destroyed my dough structure a little bit by hitting it too hard on the table. I wonder how many calories this is burning. There should be an app to track this. Kneading dough. This could be a good way for me to avoid doing additional sports. Can you overknead your hand? Can you overknead your dough by hand? I don't think so. All right. So dough is still relatively sticky, and it's not going to get any better right now. We will just let that dough sit for some more time, and then it will automatically become a bit less sticky. With my hands, I'm now going around the dough, pushing it in to just create a nice round ball. So what I do is I have my hands at a 45-degree angle. I push, pull, push, pull. So already quite nice looking round dough ball. And you can do the same with your bench scraper. And you can already see with the bench scraper, it works a little bit better because my hands are already so sticky. So what I should probably be doing is rather clean up my hands. So good looking dough ball. Just let it rest a few more minutes, 15 Minuten. And then we will be back with the next round of strength building. I like to put this back to the other container now. And just to show you, this is how the dough looks like now. I will close the lid again, give it a 15 minutes rest, and then we will be doing the next stage of dough strength. Now, this dough is so wet, that's why we have to develop so much dough strength. But for a dough that's not so wet, less hydration, we don't have to develop as much dough strength. But for this dough here, which is 85% in terms of hydration, we just have to develop more dough strength. This is essential for a wet, sticky dough. If you go less in hydration, you don't have to develop as much dough strength. You would likely already be done now after this bench kneading. I'm just going to quickly wash my hands. As you can see here, very sticky situation. Then I will be back. Give me 30 minutes. Sorry, did I say 30 minutes? 30 seconds. All right. Oops, I'm back. Hands are clean. I'm just going to be rotating the camera again and be answering some more questions. If you have a question, please shoot it in the chat. I'll try to answer all of them. If I don't answer your question today, please always drop a message below some of the videos. I'm reading through all the comments and I will be having a look at it. Because sometimes I'm not so organized. Sometimes I just don't see all the questions. All right. Santiago Leandro. Hi to Costa Rica. How's it going? Yes. Okay, so Santiago has an issue in Costa Rica. It's very hot in Costa Rica all the time, and that's what makes baking harder. Yes, it is. Because, yes, it's so hot, and that means that your fermentation process is much faster. Furthermore, your sourdough produces more acid. And so, yes, it's definitely harder to ferment in Costa Rica than I would say in cold Germany. Yes, you really have to make sure that you have an excellent fermentation process. Read the signs of your dough. I always like to extract a small probe, which I measure to see whether the bulk fermentation is complete. This is something you should definitely do. Also, your window, the time frame where you have to get things right is much smaller compared to when it's a little bit colder, unfortunately. But on a good side, you're producing more acid, so it could be that your sourdough tastes a little bit better. Hope that answered your question. Annelies, last video was awesome too. Thank you so much. Dankeschön. That really means a lot. Galabo Cooks. Yes. There are many good dim sum places around. I was asking about a dim sum place in Hong Kong. Wo Jimin, you are most welcome. SM Padel 2, for flour with protein content of around 11.4%, what will you recommend hydration level to be? I would go for 65% probably, just to make sure that everything is right. If you're a relatively new baker, then you can start a little bit lower and work yourself up. But at that level, you don't need to have the most perfect technique. The higher you go, the better your technique also has to be. I mean, you just saw how sticky that dough was, right? So especially if you get started, it can be quite frustrating because your dough sticks to your Benetton, shaping is harder, and so many things. So I would recommend to go for 65% probably. Raina Stephanie, you are most welcome. Sergio Martinez, hi. How is it? How's it going? ¿Cómo estás? Nice to have you back. Hello to Colombia. I always wanted to go to the I know it's not Colombia, but I think it's is it called the Galapagos Islands? Yes. I guess I would need to, is there a direct flight from Colombia? I have had some friends who have been to Bogota and they said it was really, really amazing. They did a hike through the jungle and they just loved it. Although I feel I need to work on my Spanish a little bit more. I almost once failed my studies because of Spanish. I had all the exams, but I was just not up with Spanish. And first year I was okay, but second year it became worse. Third year even worse, and then fourth year I had no idea what I was doing. Sebastian Höing, do you have a website with some infos or recipes? So Nerd Mode On, I do actually have a project on GitHub, which is a programmer website where you can share all your recipes. And there I have some of my recipes, but I would say the best source is here on YouTube. And I always like to mention the recipe in the description of the video. So if it's missing somewhere, please send me a message and I'm just going to be adding it. But I don't really have a blog or so. It's just an additional platform that I have to take care of. And right now I just feel it's awesome to just make some videos and teach everybody. But yeah, if more and more people ask about it, definitely could be a good option to also have a website. Well, there's actually blog.thebreadcode.io, but I'm not really posting that much over there. Lucas de Molin. Lucas, how's it going? Your videos are amazing. I'm from Gurupi in Brazil. Como estás? Tudo tranquilo como esquilo. Todo suave na nave. I just know a few words. I love Brazil. I've been there 2 years ago. I was probably to one of the best churrascos ever of my life. So really nice country. And I also love to drink a nice caipirinha from time to time. Eric Bayer, where's your hat? Oh my goodness, where is this hat? So you mean the bread coat hat? So actually a good friend of mine, whose name is Eric also, you might know this person, he gifted me this amazing hat here. This, you see this? This amazing the bread coat hat. But right now I'm already sweating. Just measuring my temperature one more time. You can see 34. So I'm not going to be wearing my bread coat hat today, but maybe for the next Dr. Doe episode. Also, cheers. Reefer DB, just inoculated my dough. Going to be making a regular sourdough and one with olives and sun-dried tomatoes. Awesome. Sun-dried tomatoes are just such an awesome source to add additional flavor. I love adding some sun-dried tomatoes from time to time. Hope it goes well. Elmo Z, besides seeing large bubbles and noticing how the dough giggles, are there any other good signs to see that bulk fermentation is at its prime? Looking at when you're at the dough size increase. That's what I typically do, together with how jiggly is it. If I see in my small probe, which I extract, that the sourdough increased a lot in size, did not increase that much in size, but I noticed that my dough is very soft and jiggly, then I'm sometimes already starting with the next shape, with the next stage, despite my probe not reaching its peak yet, not doubling in size. So typically look at the size increase and then at the jiggliness of your sourdough. So it takes a couple of attempts, unfortunately, to just read the signs of your dough. But this probe has really helped me a lot. Of course, it also depends on in which kind of container you are storing your probe, because different containers also have a different size. Hope that answered your question. Eunice Couples, can you explain what's a good water ratio for 450 grams of bread flour and 50 grams of whole wheat flour? This depends on your bread flour. How much % protein does your bread flour have? If it's, let's say 12% protein, then I would probably be aiming for 70% hydration or so. That's a good value to start, especially for the kind of bread that we are making today. This is, I would say, my bread of choice. It's an open crumb bread, and for your ratio, I would probably go in for 70 to 75%. Try going a little bit less because the technique is a little bit easier. Jose, ¿cómo estás? Nice to have you back. Have you tried different ways of shaping a tart? Would you be interested to compare the results in shaping? Yes, I have actually tried different methods. So I think this one method I saw the first time from Foolproof Baking, where they just take it out of the container, don't do any pre-shaping, and place directly in the batter. There's also this one method, which I've seen by Trevor Wilson and others, where they do some kind of stitching. Now, this method is also awesome, but I feel it works your dough a little bit more than the method by Foolproof Baking. So I prefer the method by Foolproof Baking because it's a little bit easier on the dough. And furthermore, the stitching, especially if you're new, it becomes very, very hard, especially if your dough is sticky or so. So maybe that method is a little bit faster, the one Trevor does. But I feel the foolproof method, which I also use in my videos, makes it a little bit simpler. But yes, excellent idea for a video. Elikin, hi, how's it going? Nice to have you back. Also not sent. Any advice on baking with emmer kamut flour? So for those flours, you don't have to develop any dough strength. It's not required because they don't have this level of gluten. You pretty much just mix everything together. No strength development. Also, it's all just about homogenizing the different ingredients. Hope that answered your question. Cooper asked, your initial pot kneading seemed to be a lot. Is there an amount that's considered over kneading? Oh, I don't think it's a lot. I see people kneading for 10 minutes. I must have done it maybe 2 minutes or 3 minutes. So over kneading by hands, I feel your hand is going to be tired first. So over kneading by hand, I've not seen somebody doing over kneading. It's just that when you knead for too long, you are removing some of that time frame that your dough has to develop its structure. So you want to knead as little as possible to reach your amount of dough strength. I don't know if this makes sense. Eric, how to safeguard your starter? Have you tried to freeze a small portion but unable to revive it after 2 months in the freezer? I have not actually tried doing that. I had it 2 months in the fridge without any issues. It took me a few days to revive it coming out of the fridge, but I could still revive it. Of course, it might be that some microorganisms actually died after that long period of time inside of the fridge. That could definitely be, but it still became super nice and bubbly even after that long fridging period. Vasiliki, when you make your discard bread, where do you keep the discard and for how long? Can it go bad? No, at least I have not noticed that it goes bad. I just have it in my fridge. And because of all that high level of acidity, this is very hostile towards other organisms. That's why also sourdough has a longer shelf life, because of the acid that just increases your shelf life. I've not seen my discard starter going bad. I just sometimes keep it for a month or so until I bake my discard starter bread. I actually wanted to bake some discard starter cookies today, but I don't think I'll have the time. Jai Shri C. Liar. Hi from Chennai, India. Namaste. How are you? Diana Suska, is now when you take the piece of dough to check bulk fermentation time? Yes, Diana. Good point. We should go back to our dough. Now is the time where I extract the probe. I'm just going to be returning this here. Oops. The dough is here. Now what we will do is we will do some lamination. Some also just call it extended bench kneading. I don't know what to call it. It's pretty much similar to bench kneading, except that we will flatten out our dough here on the surface. And that way we can really develop a lot of tension in our dough. I love to use my bench scraper to just quickly remove some of that dough that I left over. And now, with wetted hands, go into your container again, pull this up, fold this over to remove the dough from the edges. And good dough. Now my hands are already a little bit sticky. You might want to consider cleaning them, but I'm currently a little bit too lazy. I'm wetting my hands one more time. And now what I will do is I will flatten out this dough and then fold it on top. If you know how to make croissants, then I like to use the style that's used to make croissants, because I feel it just adds many layers. It's going to add around 4 layers. And for this, now just go in here, spread your dough like this. Use the tension of your surface, the stickiness of your surface to spread out the dough. Try to make a somewhat rectangle. Ooh, look at this. Nice jiggly dough. And now we really have a big surface area. Oh, here I pulled a little bit too far. No problem. Now we have all that big surface area, and we will take the dough and we will fold it over. And this way we make the sticky side stick to itself. And this is going to create a lot of glue, a lot of tension for our dough. So I'm just going in here one more time. And now what I will do is I will take this and fold this into the middle. No worries about this side. I can do this now. So layer number 1. So now we have 1 layer. Same from the other side. I will just fold this here into the middle, similar to a 4-way fold when making pastry dough. So, okay. Now what I will do is I will take this side, fold this into the middle, and fold this side also into the middle, making sure I pull this out again. So I pull this out, fold into the middle. Pull out, fold into the middle. So this is our dough now. And now last up is I will take this side, pull it out, and fold this over one more time. And now this is pretty much our laminated dough. Now it doesn't look so nice and round. What you can now do is you can start rounding it up a little bit. One more time, just like we did the last time. Again, we are using the tension of our surface to round the dough up. So for this, again, you want to have a 45-degree angle. You push and then pull. Push and pull. push and pull, just like this. You can also be using a bench scraper. Just want to show you that you can also not only use a bench scraper, and now to answer that question in terms of hydration, this is how your dough should be after building strength. This dough is now ready for the bulk fermentation. If your dough is not like this, well, then you did something wrong. Try to repeat one more time. This should be how your dough looks like now. You see, it flattens out a little bit, but just not too much. And now comes my trick, which I always like to do. I extract a tiny piece of the dough, and I'll get myself another container. I like to use a small glass jar, and I put my dough in here, spread this out, and this is going to be my fermentation probe. Now when I see that this probe here doubled in size, that's when the bulk fermentation is complete. And how long it takes to increase or to double it in size really depends on your temperature, your sourdough activity. That's why this probe here is such an awesome trick. You will always get your bulk fermentation right on stage, right on time. You will not over ferment. That's why I love using this. I will now mark this with a small rubber band, and that way I can see whether it increased in size or not. Let me just quickly wash my hands. I'll be right back. So, I'm back, and now the rubber band, place it around this jar, and just make sure it's flat in here. How much should you take? Just as much as it is required to cover the bottom of the bowl. So I'll do like this. And this way I know when this doubled in size, ready, safe to go to the next stage. Now this dough, I typically do this into a clean container, but I don't have one at hand, so I will just be putting it back to the pot, which is also no problem. I like to use a glass bowl normally. The problem with the pot is that in the end, I'm gonna have to likely to pre-shape. I have to pre-shape the dough because I just can't shape it directly out of the pot, especially at this level. It's okay, it's not gonna be such an open crumb, it's gonna be more of a distributed open crumb. So one more time, to remove this, I'm just gonna use my hands again, go inside, push, pull, and now good looking dough into the container. And this is now what starts the bulk fermentation stage. And for the bulk fermentation stage, I just like to round this up a little bit inside of the container. Pretty much the same thing we just did. Not really required. Just like this. Good looking dough ball. And I do a coil fold typically when I see this flattened out. So I don't do one coil fold every hour. I do a stretch and fold when I see this dough has flattened out and touches the edges of the container. That's when I do a coil fold. The more you touch your dough, the more you're going to distribute the crumb. So you want to touch it as little as possible. And I do this whenever I see, okay, it flattened out. This could be 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. Close the lid, and then this is ready to bulk ferment. I'm just going to show you in a little bit. I'm just going to wash my hands again. A lot of hand washing today. I'm sorry. And then I'll keep answering some of your questions. You guys are awesome. Phew, and it's so hot. So just looking at how late it is, I guess it's going to be ready in probably 5 hours or 4 hours from now. That's when I want to double check, but I will be using mostly this probe to double check the full progress. Just gonna turn this around. This German again. So yeah, we Germans are quite famous for bread. I would say it's probably the national dish of Germany is different sorts of bread, although we really love rye bread. Okay, back to the question. So if you have a question, please feel free to drop a question out. I'll try to answer all of them in order when they arrived. I'm now at Nancy Coombs. Degassing the dough. Nancy Coombs asks, what is degassing the dough? What you're doing is you're building pockets of air which are inflated by the yeast. The yeast produces CO2, and this increases your dough in size. Now, if you touch your dough, what you're going to do is you are going to squeeze those tiny bubbles, pretty much. So the more you touch your dough now, the more you are going to damage that structure. So it's all about not touching your dough, not over touching your dough, pretty much. Degassing would be bad, especially if you're looking for that open crumb. I see people stretching and folding too much. Well, it's a way to add additional strength, that's for sure. We add a lot of strength now, but you can add more strength by doing the stretch and folds in between. But doing too many stretch and folds also isn't so well for the crumb structure. Hope that answered your question. Lazy Days, thank you for your videos. You are awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the feedback. That means a lot. I love doing this because I love to enable everybody around the world to make amazing bread at home. That's really what my mission is, making sure that everybody can bake bread at home without buying expensive tools. I want to show everybody how easy it is, and I also love to explain the why. To me, the why behind recipes is always most important. Why do I have to do something? And I feel once you master that, then it's also easier to bake. Another strategy could be to just bake 10,000 breads, and then you just know what to do probably. But for us home bakers, I feel understanding the why is very, very important. So yeah, thanks for the comment. Rio Diaz, how much do you work a whole grain dough? It also depends on the amount of water, how elastic the dough is. So if you see your dough flattens out a lot, but still you manage to get that window pane effect, then you should be adding a little bit more strength. If you see your dough is already relatively stiff, no, then that's not needed. I'm still struggling a little bit myself with my whole wheat recipe. I'm on iteration 9. I shared the video, I think 3 weeks ago. I'm still experimenting. I'm still trying to make that perfect whole wheat bread. Mauricio Miranda, como estás? Tudo bem? Tell us how much protein is in your dough. The flour currently has around 15%. That's my head. 15%. Not sure if you can see this. 15%. So dough with a lot of gluten. That's why I'm also going to 85. For my other flour, which has 14%, I would probably be going for 80. I just wanted to make a very, very sticky dough so that I can visualize how the dough should look like, even at higher levels of water. So it's this dough is 400 grams of bread flour, strong bread flour, and then 100 grams of whole wheat flour. I love the whole wheat. It just adds this amazing taste. Listen, how did I get here? So listen, how did I get here? I don't know. Twangen. Sorry if I did not pronounce your name correctly. I'm a disaster person. How to shape high hydration dough. I have a video on this. This is not part of today's live stream, but there's several techniques. I just love to flip the pot over, take the dough out, and shape it directly. During shaping, that's the first point where you start adding additional flour. Hope this makes sense. Harley, Galapagos, you can reach from Quito, Ecuador, bro. Okay, yes. I really have to go, I think. That's going to be awesome. X-Light Wonder, you're English. Hello, nice to meet you. World-class diving. So Harley has been around the world. So I can only imagine. I have never done, I've only done scuba diving. I also need to try the other real diving, I guess. Sergio Martinez, yes, Galapagos is in Ecuador. Yes, it is. I do have a very stupid question. Wasn't Ecuador at some part together with Colombia? Stupid question. Maybe I'm entering a trap now. I'm sorry. Jeffrey from Boston, Massachusetts. Hello, Jeffrey. How's it going? So, Santiago, how do you calculate the right hydration water ratio for the flour? And do you buy the flour looking for the protein percent or not? Yes. When I have different flours at my available for purchase, I will look at a flour and find the flour which has the highest protein content. So for me, this is important because this allows me to build a dough which can absorb more water. So if I had two flours to choose, I would always pick the one likely which has a higher protein content. Of course, I look at other things, that is it organic or so, but then the protein content is going to be what makes me decide to buy this one flour over the other flour. Also, the more gluten you have, especially when you ferment for a longer period of time, the longer it takes for you to enter that over fermentation stage. Hope that makes sense. Daniel Marquez, opa outro brasileiro aqui também. So he says, other Brazilians here. Good, I think, right? Sorry. Simon Müller. Simon Müller. I think this is a very German name, Simon Müller. So for this, you will also get an answer in the German. Hi, very nice and informative videos. I try working on the way hydration ladder. Most difficult seems to be the dough keeping its shape. What protein level would you recommend for 75 to 80% hydration? So, Simon, I would recommend probably 14% of the hydration, 14% of the protein for 75 to 80% hydration. So for the regular type 550, which you find in the German supermarket, I would recommend 65 to 70% of the hydration. I hope this makes a lot of sense. But just a side note, excellent question, by the way. You can go a little bit higher. You can consider buying some wheat gluten and just mixing that. I would, for 75 to 80%, yes, it should be 14% protein or so. Or adding a little bit more whole wheat to your mix as well. That way you can also increase your hydration level because the bran also absorbs a lot of water. Hope this makes sense. Oh, by the way, at a German department store, Edeka, they have a flour which has 12% protein. It's a 405 flour, German type 405. That one I heard from many other bakers seems to be pretty good, just FYI. Miriam Vigil, you're managing your starter and you only bake once per week. So yes, Miriam, excellent question. So you only bake once per week, but you have your starter in the fridge. Well, you are going to pile up some discard, that's for sure. I would definitely recommend to take out your starter 2 days before you start to bake, because you will have a much more active starter. And yes, you will end up with a little bit of discard starter. Maybe consider making some pancakes out of them. I have a discard starter recipe, also discard starter bread recipe on my profile. Make some chips out of them. There's many great ways to use your discard starters. So I wouldn't see it as a Bad thing to have some discard starter, but more as an opportunity to make something amazing out of it. Hope this makes sense. Rio Diaz, what hydration do you recommend for whole grain, hard red, and how different do you handle the dough? Because I keep overproofing. I'm still struggling a little bit with whole wheat myself. My whole wheat has always been around 75% in terms of hydration. But yes, you have to handle it a little bit different. Maybe consider also using a loaf pan if that's an option for you. My whole wheat bread right now is not as open, as airy as I like it to be. So the crumb is not as soft. So I'm experimenting with more water, with a little bit of added gluten. And actually, I'm working on this one technique right now where I extract the bran from the whole wheat. I use that to set up my sourdough starter. I ferment it, and then this bran is going to be broken down into something easier digestible by the bacteria and yeast. Then I'll feed that back. That way, you will not have issues with the bran destroying your gluten matrix. But I'm still experimenting. I'll be posting another video on this soon, I guess. Hope this answered your question. Silvana Flamini, hi from Rome, Italy. Ciao. Come stai? I love traveling to Italy. My dream would be at the end of this year, I'll be taking a month off or so to maybe work in Naples for some time in a pizzeria. Son of the Cakes, how are you? How's it going? You didn't get a notification for this. Oh no, I don't know. Kevin Lamb, can we use all-purpose flour plus bread flour? And how does the bread texture look like? And is it possible? Yes, definitely. You can mix your flour for sure, no problem. You just want to make sure that your flour can actually absorb that amount of water. Consider using a little bit less water. Test your flour mix. Of course, if you always have different ratios, then it's hard to reproduce on the next bake. So maybe try mixing something in advance that you can use for all the subsequent bakes, just so that you have something where you can just change one parameter at a time between each bake. Andrew Ranyola, my crumb is always gummy and damp. I wait an hour or 2 hours before slicing into my bread. The crumb isn't too tight. It had some holes, but it's still very damp and chewy. Andrew, sounds like you are very likely not fermenting your dough enough. Do you have very, very large pockets of air? That's quite often a sign of not fermenting for long enough. Just like if you make a pita bread in the oven, it's going to pop. And that can also happen with sourdough if it is not fermented for long enough. So if that's the case, chances are that you might have over fermented. If not, maybe just try also using a little bit less water. I would just try to change one parameter at the time if possible. Hope that answers your question. Chief Zee of Underwood. Hoi, what German flour do you use? 405, 550, any specific brand? I like to go shopping for flour at Metro in Germany. That's a department store. Unfortunately, you only get access if you have a business set up or somebody can give you a card or so. There you can get 14% protein flour. But if I go to Edeka, Rewe, or any other supermarket or Aldi, Lidl, whatever, I always go for type 550 typically. But I also check if I have a type 405. So just to explain to everybody, the Germans, the way how we set up the numbering scale is when you take the flour and you burn it, how much sediments are left over after you burn them. And depending on that, the 405 would be 405 milligrams remain after you burn it. 550 means 550 milligrams remain. So the higher the number, the more sediments you have, and the more outside parts of the grain are inside of this flour. And of course, the more outside parts are, the more nutrients you have, and that's why this number is higher. And so the all-purpose flour, that's type 550 in Germany. So I would go for either type 550 or type 405, depending on the gluten amount. So look at the protein content and look for a flour that has a high protein content. Hope that answered your question. Andrew Ranyola, the oven you use, the gas oven, that is not convection. The heat only comes from either the bottom or the top. Whew. Excellent question, Andrew. I've never baked with an oven like this. Maybe one thing you could try doing is using a Dutch oven or so. That way you wouldn't have the direct heat, but you would have indirect heat coming through the container of your Dutch oven. Maybe that's going to help you. I also did have a very, very bad oven, a very small oven, and there the only way to get good bread was by using a Dutch oven. Hope this helps. Diana Suska, what do you do if during lamination your dough rips a lot? Diana, if it does, then chances are that you have used too much water for your flour. It should not rip. Or you did not develop enough strength during bench kneading. Let your dough sit for a little bit and try again. Try a second set of lamination. Much better to build some additional strength than not. So could be that you use too much water for your flour. And actually, just to make this not too boring, let's have another look at the dough. Just to show you, this is how the dough now looks like. And whoops. Can everybody see this? It doesn't look so sharp. Hello? Hello? Yes. Okay, better now, I guess. I'm going to be applying just a coil fold. I like to do this sometimes early after I place it in the container, just to give some additional strength. I'm wetting my hands. I'm just removing the dough from the edges of the container, like this. And now I'm going inside. And what I will do is, I will just take the dough and I pull it upwards like this and fold it over. Repeat this one more time. Rotate. Repeat from the other side again. I'm going below with my hands. I'm pulling this up like this, folding it over. You see it starts sticking to my hands. That's normal. One more time. Now my dough looks like this. Now I go here and I do this one a little bit different. I go here and do the same thing again. I pretty much just roll up the dough. Now I still have this side here, which I did not roll up. I just leave the dough like this and take this side here, place it in the pot, and then just use the other side to fold it over. And just have a look at how beautiful this dough already looks like. Exactly the shape that I want it to have also in the end of the bulk fermentation, just a little bit extended. So this is the way how your dough should look like now. If it does not, then chances are that you did something wrong. What a sticky mess. I'm just going to clean my hands again one more time. Back in 30 seconds. And here we go. Let me turn the camera around. Hello, everybody. This is the bread code from the Germany. All right, questions. I'll just be looking at the questions again. Shoot me some more questions if you have them. Jose, you bought the same gloves as I have. Yes, I love them. Actually, the best gloves I bought so far. And I actually do have some, I'm not sure if you can see this, I do have some scars already from baking. I was once in India though, and I was lucky enough to have some kind of non-workshop, and the person showed me how to operate the tandoor oven, which is so incredibly hot. But really, there's nothing better than a good naan bread. And they make them completely different than we do here in Europe. They just use flour, water, and salt, nothing else. But the high temperature of the naan, of the tandoor oven, that's really the trick. And this guy, he had scars everywhere on his hand from operating that oven. But he was so incredibly passionate about making amazing naan bread. It was really awesome to see. But it also changed my perspective on naan breads pretty much, because yeah, we do it differently here. And also, I feel if you go to YouTube and you search for some tutorials, then naan breads, they're not made the same way I saw when I was over there. Maybe another good tutorial for some point. Eunice, why do some recipes say to bulk ferment until dough rises to 50% and some others say to bulk ferment until dough doubles? Excellent. It's an excellent question. And I would recommend you to maybe also look at the truth in the middle. It's better to stop your bulk fermentation a little bit too early than a little bit too late. But of course, the more your dough increases in size, the more fluffy your crumb is going to be in the end. But if you want to be safe, if you're scared of over fermentation or a too acidic dough, consider ending your bulk fermentation a little bit earlier. Hope that answered your question. Side note, it also depends on the container that you use to store the probe. Now, different containers have a different volume. That's also something that you have to take into consideration. Some of the cakes. I appreciate you also answering. Thank you so much. That means a lot. Whew. So many questions. Add bass. You have seen some sites that suggest to mix in the salt with some water and add it after the starter has been mixed in, like 20 minutes after. Scientifically, I don't see why. So that's a really good question to research. Well, the salt is going to slow down your fermentation process. Yes, it does. But is that going to be making such a difference? Maybe it's just the fact that they will knead again in 20 minutes later. So they add the starter, then they wait, just almost like I did between my initial kneading and the bench kneading. I also waited 15 minutes, and they do pretty much the same thing. They incorporate the starter, wait 20 minutes, then add the salt, which is pretty much the same thing as I do with the bench kneading. I guess in that terms, it's similar. Is there a scientific reason? I don't know it. Maybe there is one. If so, then please somebody enlighten me. But as far as I know, based on my current knowledge, there's no scientific reason for doing so. Sharon, hello from sunny Singapore. Hi, how's it going, Sharon? Happy baking. Sam P, hello, great work as always. Hello, Sam, how's it going? Thank you so much. That really means a lot. Zimbo, Grüße aus dem Ruhrpott. Grüße aus dem Ruhrpott. How's it going? So Ruhrpott is a very awesome area in Germany, which you should definitely visit when you come over to Germany. Shannon, will the sample dough double in size faster than the actual one because it heats up quicker? So yes. So this is actually a very, very valid point. So Sharon was asking, now, if your room is very hot, is that sample dough going to heat up quicker, and thus you will not exactly know when your dough doubled in size? Yes, you have to be careful with this. That's why the water that you should be using for your dough should ideally be already the same as your room temperature, so that you don't have an issue. You don't run into an issue with that. Definitely make sure that you keep the probe close to your main dough. So that's actually a very good thought. Zimbo. Oh, thank you so much. Zimbo says that my instructions are very good. Thank you very much. Dankeschön. That means really a lot, especially coming from another German baker. Wilton Adriano da Silva, feel you. Best regards from Brazil. Thank you. Muito obrigado. SH, how do you know how much gluten there is in the flour? I think around 80% of the protein is gluten in wheat-based flours, as far as I know. So look at the percent of protein, and then 80% of that is typically gluten. I don't know the exact number. Please correct me, somebody, if I'm saying some nonsense. Dan Harrio, my gas oven heat coming from its bottom. Could it be hindering me from getting the ear oven spring when baking sourdough bread? Then Harrio, so the question is whether the oven has an influence on building that ear. Well, yes, you should have a lot of steam to get that ear. That's important. Very, very important. But other than that, I would say the main factor for getting that ear is hitting that sweet spot in terms of fermentation, good dough expansion, nice inflated dough. That's very important. Simon Miller, where did you get that high protein content flour? Just wondering. Greetings from Munich. You're from Munich. I love Munich. Munich is one of my favorite cities in Germany. I just love it there. Unfortunately, right now, the beer gardens are closed. But if you like beer, then in Munich, there are some of the best breweries around the world. One which I really like is called Tegernseer. Augustina is also very nice. I just love the culture in Munich. You go there, you go to a beer garden, you sit next to each other, eat something delicious, have a nice beer. And it's just such an amazing atmosphere. Then you see the mountains, which sometimes still have snow in the background. Just really, really, really beautiful. It's a nice city. Where did I get that flour? So I try going to Metro. Metro has 14% protein flour, pizza flour. That's a good one. And the one where I got it from, this is where I always like to buy my flour sometimes. Maybe also an option, Molino Padano. That's an Italian mill. They also ship to Germany. But you can also go to Amazon. Try searching for Caputo flour, Caputo. That's the flour that the Neapolitan pizza bakers use. There's one called Manitoba if you want to shop for your flour online. If you want to go and get a good flour at a German supermarket, try mixing in some whole wheat gluten, some vital wheat gluten as well. Then you can also just take a organic type 550, which is a good choice, and just turn that into a bread flour by adding a little bit of additional gluten. Hope that answered your question. What is that copper thing at the back, Vasiliki? That's actually a distillery to make your own alcohol. So I wanted to make my own gin at home, but then it's very hard to find neutral alcohol to make your own gin, because gin is just a neutral alcohol which you infuse with some other botanicals. But then I did not find that neutral alcohol, and that neutral alcohol which I found was more expensive than my favorite gins. So I thought, I actually never used it, and now it's just used for decoration. So, Eirik, Milch. So Eirik basically says he only keeps 10 to 20 grams of starter between the bakes. That way he has no discard. Excellent strategy. Actually, what I recommend you to do is sometimes if you need 100 grams of starter for your recipe, just make 105 grams, and then you only have 5 grams left, and use those 5 grams to seed your next starter. It's a great idea, definitely. It just doesn't always exactly work based on my schedule. But other than that, I think this is a really great way to go about it. Sergio, you wanted to add gluten. How do you know the percent? Well, you have to do a little bit of math, unfortunately. Yes, you have to calculate this on your own. That's a little bit of math. Maybe I should do a video on this where I try and epically fail at calculating the math. Wilton, how do you calculate how much steam to spray? As much as possible. There's no thing as too little steam. That's why some people love to use a Dutch oven. Or I also have a video on my home oven setup where I have another tray on top of my bread. And this tray just makes sure that all that steam that goes upwards from the bottom bowl, which I use where I put in boiling water, is going to stay on top of the bread. There's no such thing as too much steam for the first half of the baking process. Eduardo Leon, hi from Colombia. Thanks for your right and useful tips. You are most welcome, de nada. Where are you from in Colombia? Wow, we have so many Colombians here today. That's awesome. Sven van Leuven, what is the best bread you have ever tasted? I have this one bread which I really love. I also used to call it crack bread because you get addicted to it like crack. And I didn't get to make a video yet because I feel it's also something that me personally might only like. But pretty much I got this idea from a Netflix show. And in this Netflix show, they were reporting about somebody from New York who made cereal milk ice cream. You know, when you make cereals and you still have that last bit of milk left, and that person would use that milk to make ice cream, because I love eating that last part of the cereal. And so, yeah, that's what the person used to make ice cream. And so I thought, okay, why not use this for making bread, this idea? And so what I did is, instead of using water for my dough, I used San Marzano tomatoes, which are excellent tomatoes from Italy. My favorite tomatoes. They're so incredibly sweet. Actually, they're used for making the pizza sauce in Naples. Just San Marzano tomatoes, a little bit of salt. And pretty much what I do is I grind those tomatoes. They're around 95% water. And then I make a German rye bread. Just a really German rye bread, relatively dense. But the rye plays so incredibly well with the San Marzano tomatoes. And then you eat this bread and just say so much like tomatoes, a little bit sweet, but then that rye note finished off with that sour note, and then that really crusty rye bread. It's really so good. So I would say that's been my favorite bread so far. But when you come to Germany, then there's different kinds of bread everywhere. But this is just my personal preference, of course. Dan Zulia, hello. You're a little bit confused. Isn't bulk fermentation starts after you have the starter? So you take the dough for tracking in that moment. So yes, very, very valid question. So I extracted the probe a little bit later. Actually, you are right. So the fermentation process starts the moment you extract the probe. However, now we are also adding additional strength. So we are working the dough. And of course, the more you work the dough, the more it holds together. And you want to look at that dough with the same strength. If one of the probes had less strength, then the rising could be a little bit different in the other probe. So that's why I wait until the same probes have exactly the same strength. And of course, you only want to have a 30-minute delay or so when extracting that probe so that it's still somewhat relevant. But yes, this doubling in size also includes that already. So I hope that answered your question. And that's actually a very, very, very good question. Diana Zuska, you're from Romania. Hi, Diana. How's it going? For protein content is at almost 11%. How do you do a video? Yes. Diana, there's also another great baker from Romania. His name is Joyride on YouTube. He's from Romania. And he also has a video, maybe just also as a recommendation. He made a video on this recently. Have a look. Something maybe you also enjoy. But yes, definitely something I will consider doing as well. Have a look at the last video which I did. It was also pretty much default flour that I used for that video. But yeah, bread by Joyride, he's also from Romania. Karen Navarro, hi from Lima, Peru. If you want to prepare many loaves, the process is going to be exactly the same. So when you make many loaves at the same time, process is exactly the same. The only difference is that in the end, you have to divide your large piece of dough, the bulk fermented dough, into smaller pieces. So that's called dividing and pre-shaping. And that requires a little bit of a good technique, but other than that, it's exactly the same. However, also the crumb, when you divide and pre-shape, is not going to be as open if you just bulk ferment one loaf at the same time. Shaila Singh, any suggestions for gluten-free sourdough bread? Which flour would you suggest? Sheila. Sorry. So gluten-free sourdough bread. Yes, I have made it before with corn flour. I actually liked it. I also made a gluten-free starter. I just basically took my whole sourdough starter jar and I completely emptied it. So there was nothing left. I didn't use soap and I just fed it corn flour. And after a few days, I already had a starter again, which was able to double in size. And then I used that to make a 1-to-1 flour and water bread. So I used 500 grams of corn flour, 500 grams of water, and then I also used my corn flour starter. Then I just baked that in the loaf pan, and that was pretty much it. Simple gluten-free bread, just made out of corn flour with just 3 ingredients, pretty much. I wanted to make a video on this as well, but then I thought, okay, most of the audience here on this YouTube channel likes to bake with gluten, maybe something for a later stage or so. Hope that answered your question, by the way. Also, feel free to send me a message or so. Then I can send you the full recipe, what I did definitely, so that I can already share it with you. You can have a look, master it, and then teach me afterwards how to do it. Alejandro Lopez, have you used less than 20% sourdough? You used 10%. Oh, you're from Cadiz. Cadiz, a very nice city in Spain. I've been there before. Awesome place to be. I think it was the oldest settlement in Western Europe, if I remember correctly, right? And definitely also well known for making excellent wines. Yes, you can use less starter. 10% is totally valid. It's going to slow down the fermentation process, which is something you can definitely do just looking at your time schedule. There's nothing bad about it. It just depends on when you want your bread to be ready. I actually like to do this for an overnight bread, for instance, because 20% might ferment it too fast, 10% just on time when I wake up. Damesh Mali, excellent question. What do you mean by starter is too acidic? Yes, so sourdough, you have acid inside of your sourdough starter, and over time that acid increases, and this acid provides amazing taste, but also this damages your gluten structure over time. So try feeding a little bit less. Try feeding 1 part of starter, 5 parts of flour, 5 parts of water. That way you can manage the acidity of your sourdough starter. Hope that makes sense. Okay, Rod Rody. Can you use bleached all-purpose flour for sourdough bread? I've never used bleached all-purpose flour, but probably you can. Just make sure that your starter is fed with whole wheat flour, ideally. So what you put into the bread shouldn't matter that much, but your starter should have whole wheat flour. So Erwan from Chile. Erwan, how's it going? Hope you're good. He asked a very good question. How can you travel with your sourdough on a plane? Well, so I just like to take a small, really tiny small jar that's 50 milliliters. And then I liquefy my sourdough starter. So it's filled with mostly water, and I just put a fingertip of sourdough starter in it. So it's very much liquefied, and then I just take that with me on the plane. But you can also take your sourdough starter in a small, not this big size jar, but a smaller jar. The people on the airport are gonna look strange at you. What is this? And you tell them, yeah, this is my sourdough. What is wrong with this person? But so far I didn't get into any trouble. I was once doing another baking workshop in another city, and I took my dough with me. And I had an issue before where they wouldn't allow me to carry a camembert, which I bought in France, on the plane because it was too liquid. And so what I did is I just took my dough, which I prepared for the workshop in another city in the evening, and I froze it. Well, not frozen. I cooled it down to, I think it was 2 degrees Celsius or so. So it was very, 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 very stiff. And then when I went to security and I showed them, yeah, this is just my dough. And then they said, well, this is not okay. You shouldn't just do that. It's still a dough somehow. But yeah, it was so stiff. It wasn't very liquidy at all. And then they just allowed me pass. Maybe I was just lucky this one time. But yeah, that dough was with me on the airplane. So, Alikin. Okay, Anna. So by the way, Ed Bass, Alikin, Francisca, thank you so much for answering all the questions and the great discussion. That's awesome. Anna, after dividing and pre-shaping it, how long should the dough rest at room temperature before placing it in the fridge to avoid over-fermentation? Greetings from Mexico. So Anna, ¿cómo estás? I hope all is good. I have been to Mexico recently and I loved it. A good taco al pastor or a barbacoa, so good. I still need to work on my tortilla making skills, I guess. I also made a pan dos muertos. That was pretty cool. So for how long should you wait? Well, if you pre-shape your dough, your dough is very stiff, so it doesn't elongate that much. And this is a problem because the surface area that you have to glue your dough together during the shaping process, well, that's smaller. And that's why I recommend to wait a little bit. I typically wait between 5 to 15 minutes. 15, so not 50, 15. I say this one more time because people always wonder, is this random German saying 15 or 50? So 15. So 15 minutes, and then I start to shape it. It should relax a little bit, just like when you make pizza and you have pizza balls and you try to stretch them and they just go directly together. That's a sign that you need to wait a little bit longer. Hope that makes sense. Son of the Cakes, check out Food Geek's video on adding salt at the beginning. Yes, you should check out Sune's video on this as well. He did a lot of great experiments on adding salt before. From a scientific perspective, well, salt is going to impact, of course, a little bit of some of the reactions that happen when you add it to the mix, because you have some reactions happening that basically break down the flour over time. And at the same time, salt is going to change the osmotic pressure inside of your dough. So that means that the yeast and the bacteria is likely not able to reproduce and work as efficient as it did before. And yeah, so salt has a minor impact, but as Sune did some tests, not as much. So Sune is Food Geek. So Sonu says, Kia, I don't know. Hi, nice to meet you. I don't know what you're saying. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Pan Slovik, hi from Prague. You're asking, what's the difference between yeast and lactobacillus? So what's the difference between yeast and lactobacillus? You have two components in your sourdough starter. You have the yeast, which produces mostly the gas, which is used to inflate your dough, and you have the lactobacillus and other bacteria, which create the acidic component. At warmer temperatures, the acidic components will be more active, so the bacteria becomes more active. At slower temperature, just like in the Pilsner caves, the yeast becomes a little bit more active and produces more CO2. No worries at all about your sourdough starter. It's not gone bad. Just keep feeding it some more time. Try a ratio of 1 to 5 to 5. And especially shortly after the feeding, it's not too acidic. And this means that the yeast can still be very active. The moment you have more acid over time, that also slows down the process of the yeast. Nothing to worry, your sourdough is perfect. Jessica Close, good question, Pam. Yes, that was an excellent question. Really good question. Okay. Son of the Cakes, you make cornflakes, Malawi. Such an incredible Mediterranean dessert with American twist. I soak the cornflakes in ice cream with instead of adding rose water. Awesome. I definitely need to try this. I also need to try that cereal milk ice cream. Sheila Singh, hi from India. Thank you so much for answering. Please do make a gluten-free video. Yes, okay, I will definitely consider this. Thank you. Pratiti Kadam, can you say my name, please? Hello, Pratiti, how's it going? T65 flour. I have no idea. That's something you would need to double check. I think it's a French type of flour. Deanna, do you have another job, day job? Yes, I'm just a home-trained baker. I started to make pizza when I was, I guess, 16 or 18, so that's been a long while ago. And by making pizza, I got more and more into the baking game. And everything I did is self-learned. And I do work as a software engineer in my day-to-day job. So this is just a hobby which I really love doing. I just love baking. Okay, everybody. I'm now going to show you the dough one more time. And then since it's already been almost 2 hours, I'm just going to close the stream. Let me show you the dough one more time and already say thank you so much. It's been really awesome. You asked great questions as always. And if I did not answer your question, please drop a comment on some of the videos just so that I don't forget. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I hope you learned something new. Before I bounce, I'll just show you the dough one more time. So much baking. And here we go. Just the dough one more time. You see it flattened out, and over the fermentation, it's going to flatten out less and less. And actually now would already be the moment where I apply another coil fold, because it starts to touch the edge of the container. So one more time, go inside, lift this upwards, fold this over, and you will see this goes easier and easier with every subsequent coil fold. Pull this up, fold this over, pull this up, fold this over. And with very gentle hands, that's really the trick. Try to touch your dough as little as possible. And now this nice surface area is at the bottom, so it automatically starts to stick less as I folded it over. So I can just take this, roll this over. And you see no stickiness issues despite this dough having 85% hydration. And one more time. And you can already see some small signs of fermentation. The first pockets of air here have arrived on the surface of the dough. So, all right, everybody, you guys are all awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to be ending the stream right now. If I didn't answer your question, feel free to reach out. May the gluten be with you, everybody. Happy baking, and see you soon. Bye-bye. I'm still here. Okay, now I'm done. Bye.